NBA betting market video for January the 27th. Fat guys, start off with the 7 p.m. Eastern time game. 794 bets for the Pacers Hornets. The Pacers opened as 1-point favorites on the road. They've been bet up to 2-point favorites with the juice on the over at minus 108. 63% of bettors have helped push that line up. However, the money, 56%, is on the Hornets, despite the line moving against them. And it's the same thing on the money line, where the Pacers went from minus 114 to minus 127. 63% of bettors are on the Pacers. However, 56% of the money is on the Hornets money line as small underdogs.
Yeah, interesting thing. Look at the money line price. Paying out 115, 56% of the money. That's not ideal. You kind of want it flipped around, if not even more so, towards the Pacers, considering that 127 price. But they're choosing their own pain here. 114 to 127 with more money on the Hornets. Now, you could argue that with that line shift, that the money came in afterwards on the Hornets. That's always a possibility. But I think they're willfully taking exposure on the Pacers, perhaps. And that's always a good sign if you're looking for a side to take. I mean, it's not a full point movement in -1, minus 105 to -2, minus 108, because don't forget the Hornets going from 1 to 2 underdogs. You are incentivizing them to take them at the current price. So it's not a complete 1-point movement, but it's a movement nonetheless that doesn't resemble the figures in the market. So it is something interesting on the Pacers. I would like to note, though, like I said, we want to put this calculator into use. What would be the better bet if we were to take the Pacers in this spot, Big Ray?
For the Pacers, what I would recommend is betting the money line at minus 127. That's just a better price than the -2, minus 108 in this instance. However, if you did like the Charlotte Hornets, it's better to take them at +2, minus 102 rather than the plus 115. So there is an opportunity to middle here, even though it is a very, very small opportunity. And it would still probably be a losing play overall if you were going to try to middle at these two prices.
On to the OU, Big Ray.
Onto the OU. 220 is what it opened at. It's still at 220. The line and the juice actually have not moved, despite 79% of bets being on the over and 98% of the money being placed on the under. So only 794 bets. This line hasn't moved. Either it's only been out for a very, very short while, which I believe it has. I only think there was 3 instances. So the juice did move slightly, but it came right back. So this just might be equilibrium for the books.
220, yeah, that 220 minus 105, that seems pretty reasonable. I mean, yeah, especially if like the resistance points are just flickering for a second and it comes right back up. That's a good indication of it. Sorry, I'm bringing on a sneeze here.
And I'm just going to skip this. There's not much else to talk about for that line. So on to the Kings Magic game. 945 bets, 7 p.m. Eastern time start. Magic opened as 1-point favorites at home. They've been bet up to minus 1.5-point favorites at home at minus 103. 59% of bettors and 26% of the money is on the Magic, despite that line moving in their favor. And on the money line, it's also moved in the Magic's favor very slightly from minus 110 to minus 114. 60% of bettors are on the Magic. However, 74% of the money is on the Kings. So the books are taking exposure on the Kings both ways, fat guy.
Yeah, it looks like they need a Magic win, more so than even a Pacers victory, considering the lopsided nature of these two markets. -1, minus 105 to minus 1.5, minus 103 isn't a full half-point movement, but it's still like it's a reverse line movement anyways. And I think these are both strong. I haven't felt this way in a little while about an NBA game, and I kind of like these two ones, to be honest. What would be the best option if you were to take the Magic today, Big Ry?
The better option is Orlando minus 1.5 at minus 103 rather than taking them on the money line at minus 114. I give it about a 3% edge.
Wow, that's significant.
The Magic against the spread. So let's take a look at the OU for this game, which opened at 221. It's been bet up to 223. So a 2-point move on the over. And there is juice on the current over at minus 109. 59% of bettors, however, 62% of the money is on the under.
That is interesting. I mean, like, you're incentivizing the under big time here, because I guess 221 to 223 and minus 101. We love prices like that, because that's just, teetering on even money and even possibly further away, plus money at plus 101 if you could even get something like that. It doesn't tend to do that, but minus 101 is just such a lovely, lovely price. So it's interesting here that they're taking more money on the under, despite moving the line heavily against the over, more or less here. 2 points. I mean, this could be an injury type thing, but either way, it is interesting. 2 points and 4 points of juice against the over, whereas they're really incentivizing this under at 223. But the other weird thing about an injury, though, an injury usually doesn't increase scoring. You know what I mean? When you replace a starting player, he's usually not replaced with a guy who scores more. Scoring is paramount in the league, so that theory is less inclined to be so. So this is interesting that this is a strong reverse line movement, I think, from the book. So really interesting stuff here. I like this game from a betting perspective.
On to the Pistons Cavaliers game, 1,399 bets, so a whopping amount of bets early on in this game. Fat guy, the Cavs open at minus 2.5, minus 105, still at minus 2.5. The juices move slightly in favor of the Pistons at plus 2.5, minus 107. 61% of bettors and 72% of the money, however, is on the Cavaliers.
Have we not noticed, like, who's shilling for the Pistons? Because I don't know. I'm just, again, this is just a theory out of my brain. I've seemed to notice a lot of Pistons, like Pistons interest. Let's put it that way. These, like, it's a big game. Like, what's going on here? A lot of attraction. Minus 2.5. Just some slight juice change, but that's in reverse to where the money is. As far as money line too on the Cavaliers, it's reverse line movements again. I mean, very interesting here, because this isn't exactly a battle of two marquee teams. So very interesting, this volume here. And this is another game that looks pretty reasonable from a wager perspective here, Big Rye. If you were to take the contrarian Pistons, what would be the best play?
It would be better to take the Pistons at plus 122 on the money line than it would to take the Pistons at plus 2.5 at minus 107.
And I'm loving this stuff. We'll show you the numbers eventually, but we got to hide it just a little bit behind the Wizard of Oz curtain. Onto the OU.
The OU for this game, it opened at 216. It's been bet down to 215 with the juice on the under at minus 111. 13% of bettors are on the under. However, the money split quite evenly, 52% of the money on the under.
This is pretty lateral. Like, be honest, this is a standard thing. 216 to 215, but with that juice flip, I mean, you could really argue here. It's not really a move at all. Maybe just a jostling of prices. So 52% on one side, 48%. They're going to make their money on the VIG.
On to the Bucks Raptors game, 718 bets so far for the 7:30 p.m. Eastern time start. Bucks opened as 6-point favorites on the road. They've been bet up to 7-point favorites at minus 102. 45% of bettors and 84% of the money has helped push the Bucks line up. On the money line as well, Bucks have moved up from minus 250 to minus 269. 45% of bettors and 84% of the money is on the Buccaneers money line. So exposure on the Bucks, not only on the money line, but on the spread as well.
There's no reverse line movement here, though, so it's not as strong as the other games, because this just could be a lateral movement. Like, maybe people are overestimating the Bucks in this spot, but it is standard fare, unlike a few of these games, which we don't see often, showing some contrarian value, perhaps. The Bucks, if you were to take the Raptors, though, this isn't really a strong contrarian player. I mean, it is, but it's not, there's no reverse line movement, so it's not quite like the others. But if you were to take the Raptors, what would be the best play, Big Ryan?
This one's quite interesting. So it's actually a very, very minimal difference. It's such a weak indicator that I wouldn't even recommend like one over the other. But if I had to pick, I think there's very, very slight edge taking Toronto at plus 234 rather than taking Toronto at plus 7 minus 108.
If it's that thin, though, you could take that as there is a margin of error in these types of things. There's just no way to hammer down like exactly how everything is. So if it's that thin, you could also argue that taking the 7 at minus 108 to lessen your variance, because variance is something that your can only be diluted through volume. And, how many NBA games are you going to bet in your lifetime? Let's say at most 10,000. So if you tend to ease on the, you can be the benefactor of variance where it's good, or you can be the victim of it. So depending on the more bets you make in your lifetime, and the more financial stability you have, the higher variance you can kind of take. But for those of you who seem to lay it out on the wire, which seems to be an awful lot of you guys, naughty, not bankroll following gentlemen, you probably want to take the lower variance route, in my opinion, because of margin of error, which is a real thing.
And then on to the OU for this game. It opened at 226.5. It's been bet up to 227.5 with juice on the over at -108. 70% of bettors on the over. However, 99% of early money is on the under.
I say this every time. When the money factor looks like that, I'm just going to gloss over it, and I see a bunch of them. Unfortunately, if I don't have confidence in the money betting figure, I can't give you an honest assessment of it.
On to the Nuggets Heat, 605 bets for the 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time start. The Nuggets, as road favorites, open at -5. They've been bet up to -6 at -109. 45% of bettors and 81% of the money is on the Nuggets. On the money line, the Nuggets, the line has also moved in their favor from -205 to -233. 45% of bettors and 81% of the money is on the Nuggets. So exposure on the Nuggets, and the books have moved the line in favor of the Nuggets. Fat Guy, what do you make of this one?
This is contrarian theory. I mean, this falls almost identical in line to the Bucks, just a little bit less so. It's there is contrarian value in theory against the Heat, but there's no reverse line movement like the other ones. The Heat is obviously an interesting prospect, but everything is lateral. They're taking a little bit of exposure on the Nuggets, so a Heat victory would be better for the books. Things could balance closer to tip off. This one has 605 bets, and the Bucks Raptors is 718. So there's a lot more to this market, whereas the Pistons Cavaliers is surprisingly near just one off of 1,400. So that has way stronger and more strong indicators than any of these following games. But there is probably contrarian value on the Heat. And if you were to take the Heat, Big Rye, what would be the better price to take the Heat at +6 -101, or the current line of the Heat +205?
This one is very slight as well, similar to the last game. But if I had to choose, gun to my head, Miami +6 at -101 would be my decision, albeit
-101.
It's just not a huge difference between those two.
But then I'm going to circle back to my point before, because when you do stuff like this, there is margin of error. I know I'm repeating myself, but it is very important to hammer home. When there is a small margin of error, and it could be one way or the other, and it's that close, there's no clear victor, choose the one with less variance. So for me, it would be Heat +6 -101.
And then the OU opened at 220.5. It's been bet down to 219.5 with juice on the under. 219.5 at -110. 20% of bettors, however, 99% of the money is on the under.
Like I'd mentioned before, I really don't have strength in that third-party money figure, so I'm just going to gloss over it because I don't want to give out information that's too speculative.
On to the Nets-Hawks game. 756 bets so far on this game. The Nets opened as 6-point favorites. They've been bet up to 6.5-point favorites. 64% of bettors and 81% of the money has been placed on the Brooklyn Nets. Onto the money line, -225 for the Nets. Bet up to -236. 64% of bettors and 81% of the money is on the Nets money line as well. So heavy money on the Nets spread and money line.
Wow. And so as I would call it from my horse racing viewing days, a driving triple on the day for the book. 3 games in a row where it pretty much has identical market. If you could even scroll up just a hair there, Big Rye. Because look, how much different is this Nets Hawks market from the Nuggets Heat and the Bucks Raptors? I mean, there's no reverse line movement like I mentioned, which isn't as strong, but there still is possibly contrarian value if you are tracking that on the Hawks, considering they're taking exposure on the Nets. Are the Bucks gambling today, Big Rye? Or?
It looks like it. The only thing I'll say is that the bet numbers for those games are 718, 605, 756. So there's a little bit A little bit less, but as tip-off approaches, these games might approach 3,000, and then there might be a lot more exposure, you could say, by the
You're gonna
books.
get more of a better of a view from the through the lens here if you do see it shake out this way over 3,000 bets. If you were gonna take the Hawks, Big Rye, what would be the better play? 6.5 at -110, or the money line at 207?
Surprisingly, it's 6.5 at -110 is actually the better value here.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
It is just very, very slightly, though. Like, it isn't a huge difference. It is similar to the two games up top. A little bit more, though, than those two games. So it just so happens that plus 6.5 at -110 is better value than plus 207 on the money line.
I wouldn't have guessed that at -110 juice. That's the only one I was wrong on when I was balancing. So doing a little mental tally here. On to the OU, Big Rye.
Open 238. It's been bet up to 239. With juice on the under, though, at -111. 62% of bettors, but 62% of bettors are on the over. However, 98% of the money is on the under.
Holy. Have you ever, look at this total, 239? I mean, I said I don't want to speculate because I don't like that money figure. I just want to point out that 239 with juice on the under at -111. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but 239? That's a high number. High number. I don't recall seeing one that high, except for the old days when they had, what was it, the Suns and the Nuggets, where I've seen two 240s and 250s, but that's as high as I can remember.
You know what's actually quite surprising, Fat Guy, is the under 239 at -111 is actually a better bet than 238 at -105. So I find that kind of interesting.
Wow. So that's 6 points of juice is wow. Okay. Because I would have thought a point is worth less at 238, because but math is math. You don't argue with math.
On to the Lakers-Sixers game. 1,248 bets so far on this one. So another healthy, heavy bet game early on. The Lakers opened as 3-point favorites at -110. They've been bet up to 3.5-point favorites at -103. 68% of bettors and 57% of the money has been placed on the Lakers. On the money line, it opened at -161. It's currently at -160 for the Lakers. 68% of bettors, 57% of the money is on the Lakers money line. So the money line markets are fairly close. The against the spread markets are fairly close too, but they're taking very, very slight exposure on the Lakers. Almost not enough to talk about.
I think this is balanced. I was just gonna say. I mean, this is where they want it to be at this point. And this is the other thing too. This is how it usually happens. Like the other ones we're speculating on are 700 game volume. The 1,248 bets though, that's where it starts to kind of get into the leveled off range. The only game though, I gotta say that Pistons 1,400 bet on it, very interesting.
And if you guys like the Lakers, the better value for the Lakers is to bet them on the money line at -160. And if you do like the Philadelphia 76ers, the better line to take is +3.5 at -107 compared to that money line of +144. On to the OU Fat Guy, where we opened at 220. It's been bet up to 221.5 with juice on the over at -107. 86% of bettors on the over, 99% of the money on the under. Another confusing market.
Yeah, 99 to 1%. Like I said, I'm not going to speculate. It just because that figure's too dubious, and I don't want to use too much speculative information if I can avoid it.
On to the Celtics Spurs, 907 bets for this 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time start. Celtics opened as 3-point favorites on the road. They've been bet up to 4-point favorites on the road at -104. 68% of bettors and 89% of the money is on the Celtics. On the money line, Celtics have moved from -147 to -170. 68% of bettors and 89% on the money line as well. Not too often that we see the bet and money percentages equal out evenly against the spread and the money line, even though they are taking more exposure against the spread than they are on the money line, at least as the Celtics are concerned.
Yeah, that's it's Groundhog Day, eh? Like these are really like they're all the same. The favorite has more money on them. They're taking exposure on the favorite, and then the dog. I mean, they have slight move. It's not as strong as the reverse line. I see a lot of plays today, though. If you were to take the Spurs and the potential or even theoretical um, contrarian value, what would be the better play?
Uh,
Money line plus 152 or the current ATS plus 4 minus 106?
+4 -106 offers slightly better value. It isn't a huge difference, like I've said with some of the other games, but it is a healthy enough difference that I would say I would personally take the Spurs +4 -6
Given the choice
-106.
between the two.
Exactly. On to the OU, 225, bet down to 223, 50% of bets on each side, 95% of the money is on the over, despite that line moving down 2 points in favor of the under.
I know it's been a theme today, but these money percentages really just haven't looked accurate to me. So I'm gonna pass on that one just because I don't believe in that dubious figure, and I don't want to give a speculative answer off of it.
On to the Mavericks Jazz game, 1,059 bets.
Here we go.
The Mavericks opened as 4-point underdogs, and they've been bet down to +1.5-point underdogs. 45% of bettors and 48% of the money is on the Mavs. On the money line, they moved from +153 down to +107. 45% of bettors, 48% of the money. If I'm not mistaken, the Jazz are riding a 9-0 against the spread and straight up streak. Fat guy, is this where the milk's gone bad, as Charlie Murphy would say?
Well, this is the weirdest thing. This market seems to be balanced, but look at that line shift. 2.5 points. Why? They're almost, and look at the money line, -171 to -118. Could you incentivize harder to take the Jazz right now? And I don't know. This is strange. You might have missed the boat on the Mavericks, but this is one of those times I wouldn't be surprised if the Mavericks blow them out of the water. It's just one of those things where why that huge of a shift, right? Because they could have kept it like the Lakers, I guess. I mean, they are getting balance, but I mean, this is interesting, Big Rye, is it not? Because there's no impetus to move it that much.
Well, I was just taking a look at the injury report. It looks like
that's the only thing that would make sense.
It looks like Donovan Mitchell is not going to be playing because he's in concussion protocol. So that's the only thing that I could think of that would move the line that much, unless they're also expecting further news to come out on other players to be out for the Jazz. I know the Jazz played last night. I'm not sure about the Mavericks, so that might be factoring into this. But it seems like when they put this out, it was a bum line, and they've definitely adjusted it since. And the markets are very split, very evenly, considering the amount of bets both against the spread and on the money line. So maybe at -1.5, this is just where the market should be, and there's not a lot of value.
Yeah, no, that's a possibility.
So let's take a look at what this means, though. If you were wanting to make a wager on this game, if you do like the Dallas Mavericks, I would recommend the Mavericks at +107. There's actually quite a bit of edge there compared to taking them at +1.5 at -105. Conversely, if you wanted to take the Utah Jazz, it is better to take them against the spread at -1.5, -105. On to the OU Fat Guy, which opened at 225.5. It's been bet down to 220. 56% of bettors, 79% of the money is on the over. So this also makes me think that all these line movements were because of an
injury,
one instance, and it might be that concussion protocol for Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, because that's 5.5 points here, and it's even more than that realistically. Despite maybe there is value on the over at 220 at even, but they have a pretty good line on what a player's worth is to each. So, I mean, Donovan Mitchell, you could surmise that perhaps since it was a balanced market, he is worth 2.5 points or whatever the not 2.5 points between -4 and -1.5. So it's not 2.5 points across the board, 2.5 points within that box. So whatever that win probability is, you could make that assessment. And that, you know what it does is it you get enough of those and you line them up properly, you're going to be able to figure out where how much each player is worth is realistically. And then you're going to have a pretty good idea of how much that team is worth as well. So I'm going to say this probably has something to do more so with the injury than any other market factors.
And this is from 225.5 to 220. It's anywhere from like a 10 to 14%
That's massive.
difference in as far as like how teams have done over the season. So it's interesting to note. On to the Wizards Pelicans game. The Pelicans opened as 7.5 point favorites, still 7.5 point favorites. The juice has slightly moved in favor of the Wizards. That makes sense because they have received 60% of the bets, but the money is split 50-50. And the money line is very interesting because the Wizards opened, well, actually it's moved in favor of the Pelicans from minus 308 to minus 329. 41% of bettors are on the Pelicans. However, it's evenly split money 50-50. So they're actually taking quite a bit of exposure early on with only 567 bets. They're taking exposure on the Wizards at plus 280 because paying out that 50% at plus 280 is definitely going to be the worst result for the books if the money is split.
Absolutely. This is interesting for sure. Because, I mean, why incentivize you to take the Wizards more so when you already have, like, pretty reasonable exposure? I was thinking about it. You're going to pay out, like, it's not that you're going to – think of this money line market. You're going to pay out plus 280 or minus 329. You're going to pay out, like, 5 times the amount of money on a Wizards victory as you would to a Pelicans victory. So it is interesting that it's been balanced this way. So, I mean, maybe this isn't in line. Maybe the Pelicans are a lot stronger than the Wizards than what the numbers would indicate. So interesting stuff. If you were to take the Pelicans, Big Rye, what would be the better one? To take them at minus 329, laying some heavy juice, or take them at minus 7.5, minus 101?
This one I will say has been the biggest difference. So this one, it really does matter. I'd say over the long term, you're going to be a lot more profitable if you can pick the right side, of course. So we're not here to tell you which side to pick.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to pick the underdog Washington Wizards, over the long term, it would be more profitable to bet them at plus 280 than it would be to bet them at plus 7.5, minus 109 against the spread. Conversely, if you wanted to bet the Pelicans side in this situation, over the long term, it would be better to take the Pelicans at minus 7.5, minus 101, than it would be to take the Pelicans at minus 329 over the long term.
Real quick, I want to touch on something. There's a higher variance on the ATS against money line. Oddly enough, it's the other way around. When you have a favorite, there's less variance on taking them to win than it is to take them against the spread.
And then on the OU, it opened 227.5. It's been bet down to 227. The bet split has been 59% on the over. The money split 99% on the under. So we'll skip this one. Fat guy, I can already see him shaking his head. There's not much to make from it.
Don't like that.
Against the spread for the Suns Thunder, Suns opened as 6-point favorites. They've been bet up to 7.5 at minus 108. 48% of bettors are on the Suns. We don't have the money percentages, though, for the spread or the money line. So let's just take a look at the money line percentage. Suns go from minus 274 to minus 276, 48% of bettors. So there really isn't much to talk about as far as that because we don't have the money percentages.
Yeah.
So let's just jump straight into, is it better to take OKC against the spread or on the money line? And I will say in this instance, it is better to take Oklahoma City at plus 239 than it would be to take Oklahoma City at plus 7.5 at minus 102.
Interesting.
Conversely, if you were to take the Phoenix Suns, minus 7.5 at minus 108 is going to be more profitable over the long run than betting the Suns at minus 276 on the money line. Onto the OU, which opened at 218. It's been bet down to 216. 54% of bettors, 66% of the money has helped move that line down 2 points from 218 to 216.
Yeah, that does make sense. This looks like a lateral movement. It's 2 full points, but you have more money on the under. So I mean, you're going to incentivize taking the over, and they've very much done so. So I think this is balanced. This is standard book stuff. Nothing to glean there as far as which side to take.
And then on to the Timberwolves Warriors, the last NBA game of the night, 10 p.m. Eastern time start. 567 bets so far. This is one of those ones where you wait till tip-off. It's the only game being played at 10 p.m. Eastern, so it's probably going to have a little bit more than a lot of the other games. The Wolves, as very, very early number of bets, are 9-point favorites, still 9-point favorites, 54% of bettors, 49% of the money is on the Golden State Warriors. Onto the money line where they open minus 382. Wow. They've been bet down very slightly to minus 380, 56% of bettors and 49% of the money. So this is very similar to that Wizards Pelicans bet splits.
Even more so, though. Look, there's more exposure on the T-Wolves comparatively. I mean, there's 567 bets, so it is possible that the handles are very close in the ATSN moneyline markets, which would mean they have more exposure on the Timberwolves victory than any other result between the four markets. And because look, paying out plus 320 to plus 318 range at 50% plus of the money, yowza. So that makes me curious about the Warriors prospects. So I guess in a weird way, this is a contrarian pick to take the Warriors and the money, because don't forget, there's going to be a lot of Warriors like parlay ticket money. So it is interesting to like side with that once in a while. And if you were to take the Warriors, what would be the better bet, Big Rye?
Warriors -9, minus 102 is quite the better bet than taking the Warriors at minus 380.
Interesting. And if you were to take the T-Wolves, if you were going to expose the book, what would be the better bet?
Well, it's where they're taking all the exposure. That would be on the money line at plus 318.
That makes sense. See, now that makes us feel better about our numbers too, doesn't it? Because 51% of the money is on the T-Wolves. So I don't think we're the only ones that notice that there's a gap between value between the T-Wolves +9 and the T-Wolves plus 318 on the money line.
And then onto the OU, it opened 228.5, still 228.5. 48% of bettors are on the over, so not really a lot to glean from this.
Yeah, I can't speculate on that, so we're gonna have to wrap her up.
That's it, guys. The NBA betting market for January the 27th. Good luck on your wagers.